Hey guys, Phillip here, 40 Watt Podcast. So this week we're going to do something a little bit different because I am at Summer NAMM and don't have a new episode for you this week. But what I do have is I have one of our Patreon exclusive episodes that I'm going to share with you. I've talked to the Patreons. They're cool with it. So what you're going to hear is my extra interview with Analogman Mike Piera that shared only with our Patreon. So if you want to see what you're getting with a Patreon subscription, this is the kind of content we're adding just as a bonus for supporting the podcast. If you are interested in supporting the podcast, please go to www.patreon.com/40watt podcast for $3, $5, $10, $25, $35, whatever you want to give. You can support the podcast, help me cover the costs of making this podcast possible. You can help me donate some money to charity. This year I'm donating to St. Jude Children's Hospital. 25% of all proceeds from Patreon will go to them. And you can help me make lives better for them and make this podcast possible. I'm going to stop talking now and just let y'all enjoy this episode with Mike Piera. This was a continuation of our conversation that you heard earlier this season. All right, y'all. Y'all have more content coming soon from NAMM. Look forward to sharing it with y'all. Have a good one.
All right, Patreon supporters, welcome behind the paywall. Welcome to the Patreon exclusive content for the podcast. We are, of course, here with Mike, Analog Man, and I want to start diving into Mike's old school vintage gear collection because, Mike, you've got some serious pieces. Like I watched, to give you my frame of reference, I watched the That Pedal Show episode where they came and visited you, and you kind of went through some of his stuff. Yeah, you've got some pretty cool pieces. Let's start off the top. What's like your favorite piece of vintage gear you got? Let's go in fast.
The favorite piece that I have is in Canada with the musical box, the Genesis Tribute Band. It's the EMS Synthi Hi-Fi, the big toilet lid shaped effect that was made
I
in
don't
England
even know what this is.
Made famous by Gilmore and a few others. Genesis, obviously, since the Genesis Tribute Band is using it, but it's basically has all kinds of weird phasers, an octave, all kinds of random sounds like wah kind of sounds. But the cool thing about it is the way it was designed. It's very primitive circuit design, but it's very cool because each knob on the pedal can be controlled with either of the two foot pedal rockers and either the knob can go up or down when you push down. And so you can set these knobs for the controllers for all these things. So it's just an incredible design. And if you look on the inside, there's like 10,000 diodes in there to do the circuit to figure out which thing is active or not, but it works and it sounds really cool. And I had been looking for one for a long time. And actually, I bought this one from the musical box, and then they needed, because they had a different tour that they no longer needed it on. Anything, I think they first used it on The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, so anything before then wouldn't need it. But then they started doing some of that later stuff, and now they're going to continue to use it. So I don't know when I'll see it again, but I will definitely see it this fall when they're on tour.
I've never heard of this piece. I just looked up pictures of it online, and that is wild looking.
Yeah, EMS was more popular for their little keyboard synthesizers, like used by a lot of people in the day, and even like Radiohead used them for a lot of, and the Who. Pink Floyd used them for those repeating sequences on.
Oh, it's okay.
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
I'm fried. a little tired, but like Yeah, a lot of people use the synthesizers, but they also made this big giant effects pedal.
Yeah, no,
called
it's
the Cynthia
crazy. It
Hi-Fi.
looks like what would happen if you combine like a driving simulator with like a Star Trek mixing console.
Yes, Star Trek
It's
mixing
crazy
console. I
looking.
like that.
It's like a series of like 9 faders. So not, or the version I'm looking at, there's a couple of different versions. Yeah, they are
They're all
4
pretty much
knobs,
the
some
same.
switches, and then of course the 2 pedals you were talking about. That is
Right.
wild looking.
Right.
Okay.
And it's amazing that the musical box uses the original actual pedal when they're performing live, and they have so much vintage gear that it's like they're like one of my favorite bands, and even though they're a cover band, they're still one of my favorite bands. And he's got the guitar player has got the original fuzz pedals like Steve Hackett used, but he built them himself. Not only the circuits, but he made the housings out of like soldered sheet metal copy of the old Super Fuzz, the Univox Super Fuzz, which was like a bent sheet metal thing with angles on it. And he just took pictures of them from the web, and he might have like emailed me and asked me, "Is this thing 4 inches long or 4.5 inches long?" And he just made them, and they sounded and worked great. They've got the original drums, the original guitars and basses. They even have the original mixer. They're using this mixer with the old big ass slider knobs. It was like, I don't know, 8-channel mixer, and just sliding up these sliders. And does it sound fantastic these days? No, but it sounds like you're back in 1974.
That is a dedication to authenticity that I don't even understand. Yeah.
Really dedicated. Yeah. And they're great players too. And I love the old sounds too. Like if you come to Madison Square Basement to hear my band, it's like going back to 1973 or even earlier, because bands back then used the Voice of the Theater cabinets, which were actually made for movie theaters, but they were the biggest things and the loudest things because they were very efficient. So Rock Band could put a few of those per side, and with 100 watts, you could get pretty damn loud. And they just have that sound. It just brings me back to that time. Just, I don't know how to describe the sound, but it's like
I played a couple of gigs back in the early 2000s with a set of those Voice of the Theater, because so a buddy of mine, his dad owned a music store in Clarksdale. Patreon listeners, you've heard me talk about this ad nauseum. And when he first opened, he just used his collection as his original inventory. And so he had these old Voice of the Theater. He was in a band in the 70s. They covered all the typical stuff. He played a big 50-watt Marshall, the Les Paul, and they played all the Zeppelin and he was a big Birds fan. He had several Rickenbackers at one point. Rickenbackers, I'm gonna get this right, but
wow.
He had these speakers, and we were playing a show and needed speakers, and so he loaned them to us, and that's what we used for that show. And they're big, they're heavy, they took up a lot of space in the trailer, but that's what we used, and it sounded great.
You got to be careful. The diaphragms are kind of delicate. I put fuses in line with the diaphragms, so if you get a little feedback,
that's good.
They don't blow
I'd say
right
I did
out.
not know. Luckily, we did not blow them, so they're very, very thankful. But there's I can't remember if it's those same cabinets, but it's a similar style cabinet a piano player friend of mine has. He uses them. He bought them because he loves old school gear. He's an older guy. He's retired, but he still plays out and drags his Leslie, and he doesn't have a full Hammond anymore. He did at least go to a keyboard, but he uses them big theater style speakers as his pool sound system out by a swimming pool. So that's what he listens to music to outside.
Nice.
So
yeah, well, I love listening to like I have a flat screen TV that I took down, put behind there, and I will put on YouTube, and I'll put on Pompeii, Pink Floyd Pompeii, playing Echoes or something, and crank it through those speakers. And man, it's just like being there, because that's the sound they got back then. The WEM speakers they used were basically copies of these Voice of the Theater speakers, and that's what it sounded like.
Yes,
back then. It's so cool.
That's so cool. I love that sound. Obviously, I didn't start playing gigs until I didn't take up guitar until 1999. I was a senior in high school, and so all of that stuff from that time period. In fact, it took me a while to get to it. It was that friend of mine whose dad owns a music store. He was the one who turned me on to Zeppelin and even the Black Crowes. Like the Black Crowes to get me back to Zeppelin and get me. I had another friend who got me into Floyd. I'm still not the biggest like Floyd fan, but I really appreciate the music, you know. And then the Who. I got into the Who there for a little bit, but honestly, I was one of those guys. I'm going to be stereotypical. Once I got to Jimmy, I sort of just stopped and hung out there for a long, long time, and so. That was where I got, and at one point I was playing a 1971 Marshall Super Bass with a 412 cab, and there's nothing like showing up to a 200 seat blues theater with a 71 Marshall half stack 100 watts. So, yeah, that didn't last long in the rig, and
we used to do that all the time.
No, it really doesn't. Like I've got 100 watt 2-rock, and I'm never gonna really get to open it up. I'm fully aware of that. It's a different world now. So what's your favorite vintage amp you've got then?
That's a good question. I do have one of the, I believe they made 50, the hand-signed Sun Dragon Jimmy Page amps. And that's just amazing.
Yeah. I've got another friend of mine that picked up one of those. So I know 2 out of the 50.
It's so unique. I mean, it just breaks up so early and in such a unique way. So that's a really cool amp. I also like, I love my Princeton. That's the amp. And like we were talking about getting stuff on Reverb and eBay is expensive, and like Facebook ads are good. I can't remember where I got this Princeton. It might have been a Facebook marketplace, but the guy actually brought it to my shop, so I didn't have to ship it because I hate shipping amps. To take an amp that survived 55 years of guitar players and then have UPS drop it 4 feet and destroy it.
Yeah, big time. Absolutely.
And so that's the amp I play mostly now, although I also have a 69 Marshall Super Lead 100 that I play occasionally. It just sounds great. The clean sound it has is fantastic. You just got to dial the 2 channels in with the little jumper. And it starts breaking up, pretty quickly. Not like the 70s amps where they just started to put clipping diodes in them or something. I can't stand some JCM 800s I played. I just couldn't deal with them. But this one is just, it's a great sounding amp. And one of my favorite amps, maybe my favorite, is the DeArmond. I think it's called an R5. It's a little brownish amp made in Ohio. By DeArmond. I think they only made them like 1 year, maybe 1961 or something. But Steve Kamak turned me on to them. His sound is so beautiful. And then I found out Billy Gibbons loved them. I don't know how many he has, and a few other people. But it's just a little 5-watt Champ style amp, but it doesn't sound like a Champ. It's got its own. Low enough volume, you can really get nice chimey cleans out of it. But then you just get it on the edge or get it cranked.
Yeah, and they have become sought after. I just looked. They use a 6X4 in there. That's interesting. Yeah,
they have a few weird tunes.
For listeners, if you're interested, there's one on Reverb right now for $3,250. There's another one for $35, but I gave you the lower price of the 2. And it is in immaculate condition. Yeah, it looks brand new. Yeah, I had to.
Oh, that's cool, because they usually get really crusty. The control panels usually get.
Yeah, it's got a little rust around the second input, but the Tolex and the grill cloth are immaculate on the front. The
first thing that first time people kind of heard of these was the Tone Quest magazine. Fantastic magazine, still in business, and they had an article about them, maybe talking to Billy Gibbons and a few other people, and maybe even Steve Kamak. And then when I read that article, I started looking around, and I was able to snag this one on eBay quickly before anyone else read the magazine. I guess I got it. I don't know. I got it pretty cheap though, probably like $400 or $500. and
That's
it just
the
sounds
beating.
great.
That's the older version of beating JHS to putting out a pedal on it or a video on it.
Exactly.
I've got
Exactly.
I've got another podcaster who will probably never hear this because he's not a Patreon, but that's okay. From the FX Loop podcast, he bought because Josh had hinted that or mentioned that he was going to do an episode on the gear company. I think that's what they were called. I can't remember. There was this big fiasco. There was a company that formed, got a whole bunch of people to subscribe, and then to never delivered anything. But they had put out some pedals
Oh, wow.
and said he was going to do an episode on them. I assume he still is. He's just trying to get information on it. It's not something everybody wants to talk about. It made a whole bunch of younger players mad.
Right.
But he had most of those pedals, and
Yeah.
he like found the couple from the set he was missing, and so Josh hinted at it. So he put the whole lot up for sale on Reverb and sold for some ridiculous sum of money. It's like, come on. It's making it so hard to actually find things that you just want to play. Like I'm lucky I have a Paul Cochran Timmy, and I'm glad I have one now and got it before. They're insane now. Like just in the last few weeks they've gone crazy. I just
Yeah, you can't make him fast
I mean,
enough either.
he's another guy. He's making it at home, you know, and it's what he does.
But you can get the MXR, Timmy. We're an MXR Dunlop dealer. We've sold a few of those, but I thought we would have sold a lot more by now. Maybe we just have
there
to
you
come
go.
up with a mod. For
I haven't listened to one against my Timmy yet. I don't know how close.
the January mod. That's what I should do.
There you go. That's
Paint gold.
yeah. I've got a buddy of mine who bought one of those January pedals, and I'm like, the Timmy's a third of that price. At the time, it was anyway. I was like, he paid like $600 for that January, and I was like, okay. There's not a whole lot of pedals out there that I'd pay $600 for. There's just not.
Certainly not. No.
Yeah,
Same
right.
with
Not an overdrive. Have you seen? I've only recently discovered them. The Sabadius Univibes that he's making. Yeah,
Yeah, I've heard of those.
I've know now one person who has bought one, and he said it is a complete and utter revelation. And I'm a Univibe junkie, and I'm trying not to. I'm really, really trying hard not to, because I do not need to spend that much money on a Univibe. I do not. And I saw somebody put, what's that?
Well, which one are you using now?
I'll be honest. Now? So this is where we're on the Patreon episode. It'll be fine. I'm going to be slightly controversial. I was using the Deja Vibe for a long time, and then Mike Fuller is Mike Fuller and says some things sometimes, and I was like, I finally got to a point where I was like, you know what? I'm just going to sell this stuff. I had a couple of full tone things, and my idealist nature got the better of me, and so I sold them off, which is fine. I don't mind. Then I used the Wilson Effects, the Haze that he makes. Wilson makes one called the Haze. He also makes one called the Uber Haze, which has a tone knob, which is kind of neat on a Univibe. But it was a casualty of that same time where I needed to sell some things. I needed to pay some bills. And so right now I'm just using the HX Stomp and for my Univibe. And it's okay. It's good. It's not as chewy, and it does a weird thing in the mid range that I don't like as much, that I can't dial out of it. So
it's really hard to make a good Univibe. So many people have tried, and there's good. Okay, they can make good ones, but to really make a great one is really tough. I mean, poor Dave Fox has been making them longer than anybody. Anybody out there, probably add 2 or 3 of those people together. And he just gave up. He could not find any good photocells that were reliable enough, consistent enough, and did the right thing. So he's going and redesigning it, and maybe he'll come up with something that can get the Univibe sound, but can take it further. Kind of, the Roger Mayer Voodoo Vibe kind of was like that. It didn't do an amazing Univibe, but it did a lot of other stuff.
I'm going to get another standalone Univibe here, probably not too much longer from now, but the Sibelius looks really, really good. I thought, so just from the pictures, I thought they were legit the size of the original Univibe. Up until a couple of days ago, I saw a picture of one next to one. It's actually much smaller. It's much closer to like the Deja Vibe size. But it's got that, it's
Cool.
It's got the aesthetic, and the aesthetic's important to me, and it shouldn't be, but it is. So, but if you know anybody else I'm missing, Fox, I'd love one of his. A buddy of mine has one of his, and
yeah, as far as how difficult it is to make the Univibe, I was maybe one of the first Sweet Sound dealers back when Bob Sweet started making his Ultra Vibe in the mid '90s or so, and unfortunately we lost him several years ago, also due to cancer. And his wife Barbara has been making them pretty much ever since. But this last year she finally just had to give up. It was just too hard getting the parts and just doing it, and she just couldn't do it anymore. But luckily I've got her to build King of Tone boards for me now, so hopefully that'll get the King
fantastic.
of Tones going a little faster.
That's very cool. Yeah,
keep her busy.
Well, that's very cool. I didn't know that. So, it's the Univibe is one of those effects. It was the first modulation effect that I ever really got into. Excuse me. There's just something about it, and like I've tried to. Everybody told me, "Oh, just use harmonic tremolo. It's similar. They know it's not the same, but they're like, oh, use that, and it's good. It's not the same. There's something about the Univibe that just I would use it on all the time if I could get away with it. But the blues bands that I play for, we're playing Kansas City and Sweet Home Chicago. Some of those singers aren't going to really go for that. So no. So we've talked about your favorite amps at this point. Favorite effect, which completely enlightened me on something I'd never even heard of. Let's talk. I know you're a Les Paul guy, which I love. A lot of people have kind of gone away from Les Pauls because I get it, they're heavy. Yeah. What's your favorite guitar that you have? I see behind you, for example, you've got some quirkier guitars.
Yeah, actually, the first guitar I ever bought is over here. I think I got this guy in 1974, Hagstrom 2. It was black when I bought it. Took it to college. I believe it has a Telecaster pickup in the neck now, and I think that's a Strat pickup, like a 70s Strat pickup and like a 70s Telecaster pickup in the bridge, which are really nice, but it still doesn't sound good because the neck is like, half an inch thick. It's got no meat on it. And it's also got no frets because it never really had much frets, and I've played it to death. But yeah, I got to keep that one forever. And then a cigar box guitar my brother gave me, and some random. I have one of these some weird Japanese guitars up on the wall behind me, and somebody keeps contacting me to buy that Guild Thunderbird looking one on the right. But I don't have time to deal with selling guitars. Yeah, too busy selling pedals and
shipping pedals. Guitars isn't much better than shipping amps.
Yeah, but I hate
me too.
shipping guitars
I hate
too.
it.
It's just
I don't like. If I can avoid shipping anything, I will. But of course, I live down in Mississippi, and so it's wild. Music scene in Mississippi is still massive, especially over in the Delta where I'm from Clarksdale originally. And so huge, rich musical cultural history, and it is a gear desert. It's you got to drive. You got to really go. Like I've got to, for a lot of things, I'll give you an example. And this is a bad example because it's a boutique amp maker, but so I got that divided by 13, right? And I wanted to get a matching cab because I'm an aesthetic person, especially on stage. I need things to match. If I'm playing a Marshall, I want a Marshall cab. If I'm playing, If I'm playing a divided by 13, I want a divided by 13 cap. I'll change the speakers if I want to, but I want what goes with it. There's no divided by 13 dealers around me. You know, they don't have a ton of dealers to begin with, but like the nearest dealer,
Right.
I think there's one down in South Alabama, like way South Alabama, and there's Atlanta. And then after that, there's Texas. And it's, and you run into that like various issues in various, you know, pick the maker, and it may not be Alabama, Atlanta, and Dallas. It may be Nashville, which thankfully is only 4.5 hours away. But it may be Nashville, Lexington, Kentucky, and Little Rock, Arkansas, which is like 5 hours away. So it just gets tough if you're not into, I don't mean this to sound negative, but if you're not like playing PV and, you know, cheap Mexican fenders, you know, that's it. Mississippi is saturated with PV. We've got plenty of PV. Yeah.
That's for sure.
Pretty much. You're born, you get a slap on the butt and a PV guitar. I mean, that's just the way it is. So, I've played my fair share of PV gear, and I like my fair share of it too. I mean, I'm not dogging on it, but if you have more refined tastes, you're gonna have a harder time down here. So,
right.
And Facebook Marketplace sucks. I mean, you can find deals, but for every deal you find, you messaged 15 other people who never even bothered to message you back.
And then you see people everywhere, Facebook, Reverb, eBay, everywhere, selling stuff for more than dealers sell them for. Why? Why is someone going to buy it from you when they can buy it from a dealer with hopefully some support and some kind of guarantee?
It doesn't make any sense.
People, I always try to sell things, and this is even in the business. I've always I used to flip cars too back in like the late 70s to make money. I would buy sports cars, fix them up, resell them. I always tried to sell something for the price I would buy it at. If I didn't own it at that time and I saw that car for $4,500, I would have bought it. But I'll sell it at that price because I know it's a good price.
The idea is that you want to sell at a good price that people will buy, which means you need to try to buy at a price that's an actual legitimate deal.
Yeah.
Rather than going the other way around, buying at regular price and then trying to jack it up. And it doesn't make any sense. I see it all the time. And it doesn't happen with just expensive gear either. Just today, I saw someone post on Facebook a lot of 3 of the Behringer pedals, right? It's like 3 Behringer pedals, and it was like all 3 pedals for what was his price? Like $60, right? And it's like,
when they're $10
that was the things. Like somebody commented, thankfully, they were like, you realize that Sweetwater has all of these for $19 right now on their website, brand new. It's like, he's like, oh, I was going by Reverb prices. And Reverb right now is more than Sweetwater brand new. Like, it doesn't make any, it makes no sense. And it comes down to, I think it really comes down to like market education of buyers. Like, they don't understand. Like, I saw this on Facebook, and there's this seller, and I'm going to make an assumption that she's selling an amp that was not hers. Like, maybe she had someone in her life that passed or moved on, and she listed this amp. The first key is she said antique and not vintage. So it's a Super Reverb, and it's a 65 reissue Super Reverb. It's obvious because it's got an IEC plug on the back. I mean, and no ground switch, not even a hole for the ground switch, right? It's obvious. But she's got it listed as antique collectible amp for like $1,900. It didn't make any sense. Terrible. So it is what it is. But I will just, I'm going to get close to wrapping up because I know you've got a ton of work to do, and it's getting late, and I still have to eat dinner, and it's after 9, and I just realized it. But I will say, just from me, I really appreciate your approach to your pedals that you make. You're sticking to your guns with the way you make them. Like, not, you made your concession with the Prince of Tone. It's not your fault people went insane over it, and just then distribution lines got crazy. And I have a King of Tone, and I've told people. In fact, I have clips on YouTube if anybody wants to go see them. I was playing. I don't know if you know who Kingfish Ingram is. Christone Kingfish. Yeah, he's from Clarksdale. Is a buddy of mine. Invited me up on stage at one point, and I played with him for a couple of songs. I had a Les Paul, a King of Tone, and that deluxe reverb. And that was all I needed. It literally, that's the pedal that can go with me to every gig and just be everything I need. And because, you need 2 stages of overdrive. You just do. Everyone does.
Well, that's one of your Mississippi folks, I believe, Luther Dickinson. He told me when he came back from that first Black Crowes tour that he took that King of Tone, and whatever back line they gave him in whatever country he was playing, he got through the gig. And
that's absolutely right. And it can go in the front pocket of my gig bag. And I know that no matter what amp you give me, I'm going to be able to work with it and be able to play. Which that is a lot of people say, oh, you can do that with most drives. No, you can't. There's a lot of overdrives out there that you just can't use with every amp. Go ahead and try to use a tube screamer into a Vox. I mean, just...
Yeah, tube screamer is going to be a little too compressed for some amps. Something like a Timmy is going to be too hard for some amps. King of Tone is sort of halfway between the compression of the tube screamer and the hardness of a Timmy.
There's a player buddy of mine down in Hattiesburg. He has a King of Tone, had it for a while, wasn't using it for a while because he was like, I think it's it was too much compression for him, like at the time, right? And I don't know what switched in his playing, but now was the only thing he was taking for a while. And now I think he finally added he's really into Josh Smith, so he added the Eventide H9 just for the rotary sound and something else. Yeah, rotary, that's another thing. I won't even get into rotary. I love rotary speakers so much. I bought and restored one of the Leslie 16s, which was the precursor to the Vibratone.
Yeah, I have a Vibratone about 10 feet away from me, and I also have another. Actually, the Vibratone I did put out in the hall. I want to bring it home and actually use it with my band.
And I want to find another one. I've been on a search for one because I bought this at Leslie. So the 16. So CBS bought Fender and Leslie at about the same time. For listeners that don't know that, they bought them at the same time, and they made this unit. They had 2: the Leslie 16 and the Leslie 18. The Leslie 16 was a 10-inch speaker and had a crossover in the chain so that it fed the lows back to the amplifier that was driving it, so that you got the lows from the amplifier and the mids and a little high-end content from the 10-inch speaker. And then the 18 was a 12-inch speaker and was full range. And so it didn't do the crossover thing. I restored that thing. I must have spent a month deep cleaning all of the rotary mechanisms. I had to completely replace the speaker. It was shredded. It was gone. It wasn't like one of the super collectible like Jensen's or anything like that. It wasn't anything remarkable. No. Luckily the rotor, the belt, all that stuff was in good shape. Got it working. Replaced grill cloths because they had been completely shredded and replaced over the years with black burlap. It looked terrible. And then I wasn't gigging, and so I sold it. And now I'm like, oh, you idiot. You idiot. They sound so cool. So now I'm on the hunt again. But it doesn't have to be that one. Like if I can find a Leslie 16 or 18, or if I can find a Vibratone or Cordova, one of them makes a version of it as well. I'm watching a few on Reverb, but again, I run into that same issue. None of them are ever in Mississippi or in a driving distance.
Yeah.
But I love that sound.
Right.
I want it. And the HX Stomp rotary is I don't like it. It's got a weird upper mids thing that actually hurts my ear. It literally hurts my ear.
Wow.
It peaks at a point that actually feels like somebody putting pressure on my eardrums, and I can't use it. So I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's something that there's a way to EQ out of it, and I just haven't done it yet, but I'm going to work on it. Yeah. But I'm going to quit talking your ear off, Mike, and I'm going to let you get back to work. And I sure appreciate you taking time to talk to me, and it means a lot to me. And Patreons, appreciate y'all hanging out with us, and appreciate you your support. And I'm going to let y'all go with the usual. Be sure to be good to yourselves, be kind to each other, and make some noise.